Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Travis Milliman. Thank you. I am the Performing Arts Librarian here at Greenwich, and welcome to our second iteration of our Broadway Behind the Scenes panel. So we tried this last year, and it was a big success, and we decided to move it into the big house for this year's iteration. We're very excited about it. Before we get started, a few real quick plugs. So December 23rd, at the end of the month, we do have another round of Broadway on a Budget. We're going to talk about things that you can do in New York over the winter holidays. Looking ahead into the next year, we have Norm Lewis coming in January for a wonderful cabaret performance. And then looking way ahead, we have musicians from Marlborough will be here in February for their first performance of the year. And then in April, I am beyond excited to say that we have the High Priestess of Punk, Patti Smith, will be here to do pretty cool, right? For a poetry and musical performance. So yeah, it's gonna be cool. All right, so without further ado, I'm gonna introduce these amazing people who are here on stage with me. So our first guest, he is the writer behind the new musical, A Wonderful World, the Louis Armstrong musical. Yes, applause, applause. His honors include the Helen Merrill Award for Emerging Playwrights and Seattle Public Theater's Emerald Prize, in addition to fellowships from the National Black Theater and Dramatists Guild. His writing has also been seen on hit TV shows such as The Good Fight, Evil, and This Is Us, the latter of which he received 2 NAACP Image Award nominations. Please welcome Aurin Squire. Next up, our guest is the lighting designer for both Death Becomes Her and Once Upon a Mattress. His other credits include Moulin Rouge, for which he won the Tony Award for lighting design, Here Lies Love, Jagged Little Pill, The Humans, American Psycho, and much, much, much more. He received the Obie Award for sustained excellence in lighting design and chairs the Department of Design for Stage and Film at NYU. Please welcome Justin Townsend. And next, our next guest is an icon of the American theater. She is the director of 2 musicals opening in Broadway on 2025, Floyd Collins and Redwood, both of which she conceived and wrote with Adam Gettle and Idina Menzel, respectively. Some of her previous credits include last season's Mother Play, SpongeBob SquarePants, the Broadway musical, Head of Passes, Old Hats, Civil War Christmas, and much more. She also wrote one of my favorite books personally, the Viewpoints book with Anne Bogart, and taught at Yale, Columbia, Harvard, and Northwestern. Please welcome Tina Landau. All right, so everyone's got their mics. So the way this is gonna work is we have about 45 minutes that we're gonna talk, and then we're gonna turn it over for about 15 minutes of Q&A. All right, so I thought we would start out, guys. All 3 of your current projects went through the out-of-town tryout process somewhat recently. A Wonderful World did tryouts in both New Orleans and Chicago, right? Death Becomes Her was in Chicago last year, beginning of this year, and back in the beginning of the year, La Jolla and out in San Diego hosted Redwood. So I was wondering if y'all could talk a little bit about what you got out of that process, what that process is like for you, what changes it inspired, or any kind of epiphanies that came out of those processes. We can just go down the line. Sure, yeah.
Yes, well, starting Redwood at La Jolla Playhouse was phenomenal, a gift. They were the first theater we went to. Very traditionally, when you're starting a new musical, you kind of seek out a home that's outside of the glare and stare of, in particular, New York and critics. And we were very lucky. We went to La Jolla first, and they gave us a home, and it was really a home. We ended up doing, I think, 4 or 5 workshops there, where we just got to go for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, myself, Idina Menzel, and our composer and co-lyricist with me, a woman named Kate Diaz. And we just worked on the material with no agenda other than to get to know it and make it better. And that was the real blessing. Then we did our run there, and all I can tell you about the run is, like, we've come back now to New York, and we feel like on some level we haven't changed the show at all. We've just made it better. On another level, I recognize that we cut 5 songs and added 6 new ones. So it's really helpful in that way. And I just came back with the attitude of the show is kind of working. Let me go through every single second of it, every song, every scene, and see if it can be better. And that's what I hope we've done.
Awesome, wonderful. And Redwood is opening at the Niederlander at the beginning of next year, yeah?
Yeah, February 13th to be exact.
That's going to be a good one, y'all. Justin, yeah.
So I did Death Becomes Her out of town in Chicago, and it's an amazing gift to work out of town as much as it is hard. I have a young family, and so being away is a challenge to take a month and a half to really invest in a process, but also a critical step because it allows us to really focus in on what the thing is that we're trying to make. I like that word play, right? We're putting on a play. And so often in our work, it's hard to do exactly that, though it's that joy and discovery, that certainly with a musical comedy, that requires that buoyancy. Right? And so to take time and invest into, I'm a lighting designer, but I think of my work as supporting the event, the script, the making of the thing. So that as we're gathering as a team, how can we help this play, this musical float in a way that feels effervescent? Certainly that's the values of Death Becomes Her. And so we're going through the script and making it, but my job in that moment is to start to make the underground, the structure, so that we can pivot really quickly to know and follow what's happening, so that the creative team can be, as myself as a part of that, as most nimble as we go into the crunch of moving into New York City.
Oh, yeah. And I was going to ask this next, but I might just go into it real quick. Personally, I mean, what is it like working? And you were saying it's hard, you have a young family, but do you have to do anything kind of just personally to keep yourself, whether it's mental health in check, or you need to like have that Zoom call with the kids every night? Like, is there anything you have to do as a result of the out-of-town tryout?
Well, I mean, I flew back every day on the day off, right? And that's, so I'm a chair of NYU, so that's filling up the other time, but we're all busy, right? This is a part of what our modern life is. But being, and I don't know for whose mental health that was, flying back, but it was important. Having done out of towns where I didn't go back, I was aware of my participation in being a part of what family meant, and so how do I participate in that and still do the things that I love doing?
Thank you so much. And Aurin?
Well, for me, it's slightly different because A Wonderful World is a jukebox musical. It's a catalog musical. And out of town, it was finding the right combination of songs. And I think a catalog musical is more like a puzzle. Someone goes, here's the frame, here are the songs, fit these songs in this thing, as opposed to a new musical where you could just take a song out or write something new. And it was like, all right, let's see audiences' responses to this combination or to this flow of songs. Also, usually I'm working in television, and at the start of the pre-production process in 2023 was when the WGA strike started. So it was, for me, a gift, because it was being able to focus totally on this. And then when we were in New Orleans, the strike ended. And then there was this flood of TV stuff that came back in the middle of traveling from New Orleans to Chicago. It was like switching back to TV stuff, TV meetings, and then seeing the show and having to pause, because in theater history, I read stories about out of town in Boston and DC, and you're rewriting every night, and then you have new pages. And I think we live in a new era because of cost and union rules, that a lot of times you just have to sit there with the thing you want to change and look at it every night and be like, I want to change this, but I'll do it when this thing ends. And so you're looking at like the flaw that you want to change every night. And sometimes the flaw works out, and maybe it's just being too anxious. And other times you just have to sit there with the thing you want to change for like a week or two while audiences are watching it.
Yeah.
Painful.
Yeah.
Union rules.
Can I ask, between New Orleans and Chicago, was there any like big difference you noticed from the audience? Was there anything that like New Orleans really jived with that Chicago was like, eh?
I mean, this started in Miami. Miami and New Orleans have the same audience, which is they are not New England theater people. They like to party. They like to drink. They get up in the middle of plays as well as musicals to go get more drinks. And when I was down in Miami, before I was working on a play called Confessions of a Cocaine Cowboy. I went down to the theater to check out a play, a wildly popular play called The Cubans, which is like a family drama about Cubans in Miami. And I was with my partner, and I was like, watch this. I was like, what's going to happen? I was like, people are going to get up. They're going to be enjoying this. They're just going to get up in the middle and go get a drink. And so he was watching that, and he was like, oh my God, they're just standing up in the middle of a play, laughing like it's a television show and going to the refrigerator. They're just, ha, 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 and they just go, and then they just come back and sit down. And part of the Cubans' audience was on stage. So people would get up on stage, go get a drink, and come back. And to us, and to people, I guess, in the Northeast, it's like a horrific shock. And in New Orleans, it's like, get another margarita, come back and watch the show and be.
I have to say, I would love that. I wish that would happen on Broadway. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I need to go see more New Orleans theater.
You need to go see more New
yes.
Orleans theater. It is interesting when they're on stage, though, doing that. Like, I saw Our Town, I was on stage in the pews if I got up in the middle and came back with a new drink. But yeah, if you're in the audience off to the side, it definitely alleviates the pressure. It makes it more of a party atmosphere. And by then, everyone's partying and having a good time. In Chicago, they're more of a listening audience. No one's getting up. And everyone's listening closely. And it's, in some ways, entirely different from New Orleans, where people are, on their phones having a good time. And then at the same time, at the end, they love the show. It's just a different energy.
The idea of seeing Our Town on Broadway, I also sat in the pews, and going to get like a frozen daiquiri or something from the people and coming back of Our Town of all shows is camp as can be, and I'm all
Jim
for it.
Parsons is like doing his monologue,
Yes.
just sit back down.
Yeah, I'm only saying it because what's appealing to me is I think that so much theater is like us and them, that the fourth wall, the proscenium, kind of separates audience and performance so much. So I'm always striving to break that down anyway, because I feel like we're in a room together. That is the magic of theater, is like this live moment. And the less we can feel like there are people and consumers and judges out there, but like friends and collaborators, and we're up here feeling the same. I just think that's when like the fun and joy happens. So that's why I point to it, like, Shakespeare used to do.
I mean, I love that. Like, black theater that I grew up in, there's more of a response to the audience and people talking back. I absolutely love that. When there are 3 drinks in, though, I become nervous, and I'm like, okay, are we gonna have a problem here with like fluids coming up? Are we gonna have to stop the show? I become nervous when people are at their 4th daiquiri, and they're more like woozy, and maybe that's me being overly anxious. But yes, talk back to the audience. Yes, shout.
Tina, I don't know how much you can say, but with Floyd Collins, one of the things I love about that house, it's gonna be at the Beaumont at Lincoln Center, is that the stage like juts out into the audience, and the audience is totally, in my opinion, cast in the show. Do you have any plans or anything you can share about like kind of breaking that 4th wall for Floyd Collins?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I'm doing these 2 shows, Redwood, which is in a very traditional Broadway house, the Nederlander, and Floyd at the Beaumont. And Floyd is a thrust, but I will say that both shows are being designed in a way to spill out into the house. So it's like, I don't really care where I am, I'm going to spill into the house. And Floyd, it's, excuse me, you have to stage, when you're staging for a thrust, which means an audience is sitting there and here, it necessitates a very particular kind of staging. And the beauty of us doing Floyd Collins, which, if you don't know, and I don't blame you, is about a man in 1925 who goes spelunking underground and becomes trapped underground, and above him springs up the first great American media circus, 1925 Kentucky. And it follows that carnival as well as his personal journey underground. And one of the reasons we've held out doing the show for 30 years. I wrote the show 30 years ago, and I'm doing it again for the first time. And we held out for the Beaumont, which I don't know if you know the space, but it's cavernous. Not the stage, but the house itself. It's raked up, and so I feel like that evokes the inside of a cavern, and we're kind of considering the entire theater our space.
Amazing, and I was already so excited for this show, but that's just spectacular. The Beaumont, so right now McNeil's at the Beaumont. If you've seen McNeil, it's a wonderful space, and Jeremy Jordan just got announced, right, as the lead of Newsies fame and many other things, so it's gonna be, I'm super excited for that. While we're on the topic of audiences still, Justin, so when I saw, so I will preface this with this. I saw Death Becomes Her on October 30th. So it was the day before Halloween. People had gone out and been partying a little bit. And so I saw Death Becomes Her, and the show opens with Michelle Williams of Destiny's Child fame appearing from the stage, and the audience freaked out and clapped for a solid, like, many minutes. And then her opening number, same thing happened. And then there's so many moments like that. But are you seeing in the preview process, or did you see, because you opened 2 days ago, in the preview process, to me that was a very, it was not what I'm used to seeing in a Broadway musical, to like sit there in previews, which is usually I think more the theater crowd, and that joyous and that like vocal and that celebratory. Was there anything that you noticed in the process that stuck out to you?
Well, I mean, I think for me, we're at a moment in our lives where being together in a group and being joyous, to celebrate, to bear witness and be a part of something is really exciting. And I think that's this immersive idea, or being able to talk to people, right? That to actually be engaged in that way. And for whatever reason, and of course we've been working on this, but having her amazing entrance and recognition, I think, is really smart casting, and also a really amazing gift that she gives us to say, here I am. And it's just her in front of a curtain. It's not a big set reveal. It's just, here's the audience, here's the actress that we all know and love and celebrate. And it starts so it ignites the show with just fire from us to be happy, and then the song takes off and off we go. And then we see Megan Hilty comes out, Jennifer Simard comes out, right? So it continues this release of people we or many of us celebrate, and so it frames the event of just being in a room together, of a joyous experience, and I think that is one of the amazing moments that lifts the show.
Definitely. I also think your lighting, I think, actually primes it too, because when you walk into the theater, there's kind of this like purple like haze for the entire time you're sitting in there, and so you know that like this is not, I don't know, this isn't like 42nd Street where you're gonna like watch some tap dancing on stage. Like there's gonna be something here, it's gonna be some magical, and it's really, and that to me, that pre-show, which is subtle compared to like Moulin Rouge, for example, that really was impactful and did a really good job of like putting you in a sense of place.
We did Moulin Rouge out of town in Boston, right? And I don't know if any of you all had this experience, but in our circles, the big neon Moulin Rouge sign came in, and everyone's Instagram feed fed that, right? And that was all over for a very long time, of selfies in front of that. And it sets the tone, and that might be viewed as a commercial impulse, but it's also, again, community. We're a part of something. And one of the sneaky things or maybe not sneaky, I'm turning all the lights into the audience to be purple so that all of our selfies have a sort of purple undertone that like we can recognize, oh, you were there. In a way that, again, sorry, you all know the secret, but that we don't need to, we're just inviting people in to see, being a part of something.
Just to stay with you, Justin, and shifting into Moulin Rouge a little bit, so 2 questions about Moulin Rouge. Firstly, just celebrated 5 years, so congratulations, yay. If you haven't seen Moulin Rouge yet, I don't know what you're doing. It's so much fun. So what is your relation with the show after it's been open for 5 years? Like, do you go back and check in? Do you just have an associate that kind of reports to you? And then secondly, it's almost entirely crossover for the design team from Moulin Rouge to Death Becomes Her. It's you and Derek and Peter are the set, light and sound. So do you guys, to me, that's not super common, especially something proximity and kind of in the same vein. So did it make any shortcuts or any, did it allow you to do anything kind of like special in your collaboration in the design process?
It's pretty neat to work with those thoroughbreds. I mean, these designers are amazing collaborators, right? And so now we're actually doing a new show, Bobby Darin, that will be in Circle in the Square. That same group, and there of course is a shorthand, and we can start to accelerate some of the cost issues. I wonder if we can be more precise in the technical details to get what we're trying to get in the artistic details. So having those conversations are really exciting, and helpful.
Sorry, also just the 5-year thing with Moulin Rouge.
Oh,
so yeah, I was just curious.
So what am I doing with Moulin
Yeah.
Rouge? So Moulin Rouge just opened in Utrecht for anyone who's there in the near future, and we'll begin the world tour. Will start in Edinburgh this spring. So this is an amazing rollout of a Broadway production, right? I came from working in downtown theater where we would have a 2-week run. Like that would be a big run. And so to now be involved in an institution that's having such a global impact is, I feel really blessed by that. And so I try and stay involved with the Broadway production, but of course also the global productions. In more in the conversational way, there's a huge support teams that support each of the shows. So I'm not every night there, but trying to make sure that we can all keep the sort of top-notch quality in place.
Cool, thank you. And then Aurin, on the topic of collaboration, the kind of structural org chart, whatever we're going to call it, of A Wonderful World is kind of interesting because there's 3 or 4 kind of directors conceivers who we're working with. So Christopher Renshaw conceived and directed it, but then also James Monroe Englehart, who plays Louis Armstrong, and Christine Sajou, is that how you say her name? Also co-directed it with Christopher. So I was wondering how that works for you as a writer, because that's usually it's writer, director, maybe a producer or something, but you have 3 directors to kind of be working with. So what was that process like for you?
I mean, it started with me, Chris, and Andrew Delaplane in 2018 in Miami, just sitting at Smith & Wolinski's on South Beach and going like back and forth and figuring out what the frame is and what the songs are. On the out-of-town tryouts, it became clear that Christina was doing a lot, and usually people who are assistant directors don't get credit for all they're doing, so that became natural. That was already happening. And then as a leading man, you're kind of doing a lot on that end as well. So they decided to change those positions. And then when it broke down into the room, Christina would do a lot of the ensemble stuff. And with the choreographer, Chris would do some of the book stuff and the more intimate scenes and some of the transitions with the choreographer. And then James would go back dramaturgically. He wouldn't direct on stage because that's strange to do that as an actor, but just pre-production and in the morning go through like, okay, this is what's happening, and chime in and have these debates and just about what is the crux of everything. So it was a fluid, it was new. I've never done that before. And I was like, okay, this is a new experience, but why not try it?
I don't hate the sound of that, honestly. I think it sounds kind of great as someone who has directed and dramaturged, like having that kind of almost like a holy trinity of sorts to kind of lead a production sounds wonderful.
Yeah, and you could be in one room doing your thing, and then someone else is directing an ensemble scene.
Yeah.
In another room, you put it back together. The choreographer's doing the dance stuff, and you sort of are doing multiple things at once.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I will just plug real quick, the choreo for A Wonderful World is crazy good. Like the big tap number especially is just like stands out to me as something that I will not forget anytime soon.
Yeah, and that's a credit to choreographer Ricky Tripp and DeWitt Flemings, the tap choreographer who plays one of the characters in it. And so they worked in tandem. Even Ricky Tripp, there's an early part on the riverboat. They hired someone to come in and just teach the actors how to do not jitterbug. Maybe it was jitterbug, how to do that officially, rather than have a choreographer sort of figure it out, like let's get an actual expert in. So they're not afraid of asking for help and bringing in people.
Tina, for a collaborator for you, what is something you look for? What does your dream collaborator do in the room with you?
I think my dream collaborators, which can range the gamut from designers to actors very often, I consider, in a way, my closest collaborators. It's about bravery, openness, working with a big heart. I love to make things where I invite everyone to work with and from their most open, playful, silly selves that aren't afraid of being wrong or failing. And I always like to say that I'm at my best when I'm editing. So I am not a director who tells people what to do. I'm a director who says, try something, and go, and everyone play. And I find people who are most open to that kind of adventure and playground of the soul are the people I love working most with.
Sorry, that just speaks so well. So this is actually my second copy of the Viewpoints book. My first one, which I had through my BA and MA in theater, is being held together at home by glue and a prayer. So I went out and got a second copy. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about Viewpoints and also just how you use it in your rehearsal process.
Sure.
Sorry, it's a can of worms, I know.
It's so hard to...
Yeah.
So probably most of you don't know what Viewpoints
Yeah.
is, but I did write this book with Anne Bogart.
Who's a genius, and I love dearly.
Probably, I don't know, 20 plus years ago. It is a training technique, a philosophy. It's a process. It's an offering of a process for a way groups can work in rehearsal that has to do, it's called Viewpoints because it has to do with things you're aware of while you're working. So like put your view on topography, like the floor patterns on stage, or on tempo. And there's 10 viewpoints we work with. I always use viewpoints in training my companies that when we work together, both because it's a shortcut of language, so that I, in rehearsal, instead of saying the thing that always happens with big casts, which is, okay, you move a foot left, now you come down stage a hair, like I can literally say one of the viewpoints, which is spatial relationship, and the cast just goes, do, and we're done. And so it's a language, but it's really if you think about like a pianist might practice scales, or what an athlete might do, or a ballet dancer at the bar, how do actors practice openness and spontaneity and daring? Like, there's no system. And this is doesn't give the answers, but it's kind of an invitation of things we could try to do to help create a room where people are listening to each other and working with a sense of trust and collaboration and ensemble je ne sais quoi.
Very well said.
That is so
Very
not
well
explained.
said.
But
no, I mean,
anyway,
it's a can of
whatever.
worms, and people spend like years and years studying it.
I
so.
mean, this was something that Anne Bogart learned from a woman named Mary Overly at NYU, and it really sprang out of, like, in the late 60s, a postmodern art movement in New York with Merce Cunningham and John Cage, and really kind of questioned what we think of story as. And I got involved with Anne, and over the years, we've developed it and changed it. So our viewpoints have nothing really to do with Mary's, but we had no idea the impact this system and this book would have, but it really is taught all over the world now by gazillions of people. And when I get a new cast, I'll say, how many of you have done viewpoints? And usually like 90% of the cast raise their hands from some training they've had somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, to expand on that, and so I am from the Northeast, learned it here. I've trained in Moscow and London, and both those places broke it out. So it's all over the world. Like, they've had the opportunity to study this book. It's very important. We're working on getting a copy here at the library. So yes. Okay, yeah, great. I would love. Yes. Okay, definitely. You also are a founding member of Steppenwolf? or
No,
just
I'm
member?
not a founding member. I'm
Okay.
a member.
A member. Okay.
Yes, Steppenwolf, I don't even know what year it was founded, but long before me. I became a member, I think, in 1996.
Okay.
So
Does-
long term, yeah.
Did you bring viewpoints to Steppenwolf too?
I did.
Love
And
that.
it was so exciting because if you know Steppenwolf at all, it's, these great actors who are steeped in kind of psychological realism and naturalism. That's what Steppenwolf is known for. And I thought, this is going to be a disaster. I'm going to come in and start talking about shape and architecture and all these weird experimental ways of approaching things. But what I quickly learned is that the goals were the same. It's like what I was after and what the company was after, which is a sense of honesty, boldness, daring, truth, play with your partner on stage. The values were all the same. And there's just different ways of approaching it. And that's how I think of viewpoints. It's not the way. It's yet another way people can choose from the buffet of how we make theater.
Wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Steppenwolf, for those who do not know, is a legendary repertory theater company in Chicago. Whenever I have friends going to Chicago, I tell them go check out whatever Steppenwolf's doing because it's usually good. I have not been let down by Steppenwolf personally. So yeah, definitely check it out next time you're in Chicago. Justin, to go back to you real quick, you also it has one more week, I believe, like designing Once Upon a Mattress at the Hudson now, starring Sutton Foster. And I was just curious, so that story is, obviously it's its own spin on the Princess and the Pea story, but it is a piece of folklore, fairy tale, whatever you want to call it, that is thoroughly ingrained in definitely at least Western society. So I was just curious, before joining the project, if you had any kind of relationship with that story, or since you have a young family, do any of your kids like the story or know the story? Or I mean, even if it's just, and the Carol Burnett performance is obviously so iconic.
Right.
So yes, round of applause for Carol Burnett, everybody, yes. So, I mean, just what was your relationship with such an iconic piece of theater and going into it and trying to put your own stamp on it?
Well, I don't know if I'm ever trying to put my stamp on anything. It's so much just kind of get underneath it and lift it higher. It's Sutton Foster. Has anyone seen the show? Seen it? Yeah, right? I mean, she's, and the whole company, it continues the company in itself, and that's led by Lear de Bessenet, who really is interested in this idea of company. Lear de Bessenet, who I met at a Viewpoints training years and years ago. So the effort is not to make a stamp so much as to say what's singular now, what feels vital now, how can we support these amazing, thrilling performances and really share them with the company, with the audience.
I just would like to add that I've acted twice in my life, and one of my roles was the second lady in waiting in Once Upon a Mattress.
Not this production.
Lear de Bessenet, who also just got announced as artistic director of Lincoln Center, where Floyd Collins is going to be. Lear is amazing, one of my favorite directors in New York, and so I'm very excited to see where that goes. So, excellent. Back down to Aurin. As you mentioned earlier, you frequently work in TV. And I'm just curious if you could talk about, for you, what the difference is between writing for TV and film. Because you started, TV and stage. So you started more with stage. We shared via email. Aurin has this wonderful, wonderful play that I'm also working on getting a copy of called Obamaology that I did so much work on in grad school, and I just love it. And so that to me was my first exposure to you, and then seeing that you've done all this TV since then, I just think it's cool that you've done both and done both so differently. So just if you could talk about the difference between the two for you.
I mean, I had an unusual TV experience in that Robert and Michelle King love playwrights and they love theater people. So my first job on Brain Dead, it was a room of 6 writers, 5 of us were playwrights. And at lunch, we talk about opera and theater and all these other things. On the museums, and this is my first writer's room, and Jonathan Tollins told me, yeah, this is not a normal TV writer's room. And I was like, this is very different. And then I went out, worked on This Is Us, and it's always, to me, it's more like building an engine in problem solving on a deadline. There are TV shows now where people take 3 years to do one season. That has never been my experience. It's mostly you start working on it, and while you're working on an episode, you're also working on post-production, editing stuff. You're watching dailies from what's being filmed, and you're planning out future things. So you're on these different tracks throughout the day where you are writing it or thinking about it, outlining the next thing, looking at what's being shot right now or location scouting for the next thing, as well as looking at some editing. And these are all different episodes. So the mind sort of pops around into these pods as opposed to theater where it's more poetry. You get to sit there and just be with the work and see it all the way through. And then doing both at the same time, it's an interesting mental exercise. There was a 4-year period where I was on The Good Fight and Evil at the same time, overlap. And they were in the same building. And so I'd run up the stairs and go to the Good Fight room, and they were like, oh, okay, what have you seen? And I said, well, I've seen something called Slave Play. I think that would be a good episode for The Good Fight, blah, blah. And then I'd run downstairs to Evil and pitch something about Ghost and Supernatural, and then at night we'd go see theater and then come back in the room and say, I saw this amazing actor or actress at the Public Theater. And a lot of times that is why Evil and The Good Fight have so many theater actors in it, from the people in the room recommending and seeing stuff. And it reminds me of like old school 60s, 70s television, when there was more of a connection between theater and television, where you had actors who would act during the day in soap operas and on TV sets, and then at night would go and do their Broadway play. And I always thought that would be a dream to bring that microcosm back, because it allows you to exercise so many different parts of your brain. As a writer, as a director, as an actor. There was someone a few years ago, they said, we want more women directors for The Good Fight or Evil. And me and Jackie Reingold, who are both playwrights, were like, we have a theater director right there who's on the staff. And they're like, oh, really? And so she got to direct her first television episode, then another TV episode, then another TV show, and now she's off to the races. But they were looking outside for a woman TV director, and I said, well, you have a theater director right here who's working on the crew. Why don't you just give her a shot? And so that's the wonderful blend between TV and film and theater when it could happen.
That is such a wonderful way, A, to get your steps in, but then B, to like germinate creativity and like cross-pollinate. I was reading, I think it's Lenny Kravitz's memoir, which is wonderful, and you all should read it, but especially the beginning of his life, talks about how he was raised by these aunties who were like Dion Carroll and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name, Cicely Tyson, and like all these like wonderful, amazing people who like helped raise Lenny Kravitz, and how Dion Carroll would like do shows in the morning and then go be in like the River Niger on Broadway at night. So like, just it's a really cool thing that I also would love to see more of. I think that's great.
And it improves the quality of television so much, as well as theater. There are things that I've seen Regina Taylor do. There was an episode of The Good Fight. She's acting opposite Audra McDonald and Christine Baranski. And so you have this room of theater people, and the intensity and the focus they're able to bring to this frame while having their whole body in the TV show, you can't compare it. I think, unfortunately, because we're on our phones all the time and screens, what I've noticed with the younger generation of actors who want to immediately do television is that a lot of them are dead from the chest below. And completely dead from the waist below, and because they haven't used it. And so we're always like this, and so they put all their acting here. But really, if you could put your acting all the way through your body, that makes this so much more compelling, even if it's a close-up. And we were in the editing mod watching that scene between Christine Baranski, Audra McDonald, and Regina Taylor, and it was magical. And then to see the editor add their little twist on top of it, it was indescribable, you know, and you're working with these Broadway legends.
I mean, Christine Baranski and Audra McDonald's coworkers is, it's about as good as it gets, you know? Yeah. Did you have something, Tina? I thought I saw you. No? No? Okay.
Hello. I was just thinking about how true it is when I'm in auditions for shows, how many actors come in and operate from their waist up. And I'm like, oh, that's why. So that's all. It goes both ways. It's interesting.
We love an epiphany. Yes, that's great. So we have to switch over to the audience here in a moment, but I wanted to just real quick end with this question. It always gets asked, so I thought I would just kind of ask it up front. Going back, looking back at your life, what was that moment in childhood or teenage years or college, whatever, where you were like, this is why I want to go into theater and this is the thing? Do we need a minute to think about it? That's okay.
I was a little odd. I don't know if you all remember this movie, Annie Hall. Okay. Well, do you remember there's a section where the little kids come forward and he's like 6 years old and he's like, "Hello, I'm an accountant." And it's these little kids who are just being, adult professionals. I, for some reason, was like born out of the womb saying I was a director. Like, really. So, my family was in show business and I grew up going to the theater. And I was definitely an escape to my own world and create something kind of kid. But I really, odd as it is, I knew I wanted to direct, and that was going to be my life from when I was about 6.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I wish I had that. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
I grew up in Miami. There was no theater or any arts discipline growing up. There was painting. We had painting. But, I think the entire first 18 years, I saw 2 plays, one of which was Dreamgirls at Miami-Dade Community College because my parents wanted to see it that night. So they dragged me along with them. I didn't know what I was watching. I was like 5 years old. I just remember there was a lot of dry ice. And then Midsummer Night's Dream, someone did an afternoon production just for students. We were in the 2nd grade. Other than that, and they did it in the aisles. They didn't use the stage. So they did they were out in the audience talking to the kids. And then I didn't see anything until I went to Northwestern. And it was cheaper to see a play than to go to a movie. So I was like, well, I'm going to see a lot of plays. And the first play I saw was someone adapted Leon Forrest's Divine Days. Leon Forrest was a black novelist. His editor was Toni Morrison. And there's a lot of imagery in Leon Forrest's epic books that Toni Morrison then transforms into Beloved and Song of Solomon. So if you want to read a precursor to that, there's Leon Forrest, but his books are 1,000 pages long. And Divine Days is an epic, huge exploration of black life that someone adapted on stage. And it was over 4 hours long. It involved the Cadillac being on stage. It had Motown singers over here. It was a maximalist, spectacular feast. And I walked out of that thinking that I'd just seen theater for the first time. And it was wow, they took that book and made that, which is so, and then I sat down and read the book, and it's so different. And at the same time, it's a companion piece to this epic novel that I thought I want to hang around more of my theater friends so I can get, free tickets to their shows, but also just so I can learn where does that magic come from? Because I was a film major. Where does that ineffable magic in the room? I remember they did Pippin in the Shanley Shack, which is next to the Kellogg School of Business at Northwestern, and it's a shack. And it was magical. They did it on no money. They just had black leotards, and we were in a shack, and they did Pippin, and that was another magical moment of this is different. I love film, I love television, but this is different, being in the room. And something clicks with the audience, and this link between the performer and the audience and everyone around, and there's nothing like it.
Real quick before we get to Justin, I just want to be curious. The play that was cheaper than a movie, was that part of Chicago's storefront theater scene, or?
Just Northwestern, a movie costs $10, and if you're a student, a play on campus costs $4.
Oh, I guess that works too. Yeah.
So it was just, I was on almost scholarship full, and so I didn't have a lot of money. So I just worked all the time, work-study job, and it was just more affordable and interesting to see live performance than to see a movie.
Cool. I was going to wax poetically about Chicago's wonderful storefront theater scene that is just a wonderful way to see accessible art. But
Took us to Steppenwolf. I saw
Yeah.
Ragtime before it came to Broadway because Frank Galati was the professor. He brought all the Northwestern students to the out-of-town show in Chicago.
I think the other cool thing that we're learning up here is even though it is a big industry, the theater industry, everyone is connected. I mean, the Chicago connection alone, Justin and Tina know each other. I mean, it's pretty wild how connected everyone is. Justin, do you want to share your experience if you can think of one or a moment?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, shout out high school and our growing arts programs that are in our towns, right? Because it was in that moment of watching Oklahoma in the audience that I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want to be a part of that. Right? And I had no idea what that meant, and I was a really amazing actor in the fourth Russian Removed and Fiddler on the Roof, I think, and tried to go to college and not do that thing, and proceeded to do fine as a economist biology person until I got a 1.0 because I took a lighting design class, and I got an A in lighting and 3 Fs, which will be forgotten. And I took a victory lap at that school, so my 5th year, and at the end of that year, I said to my professor, well, now what do I do? I mean, and they said, well, you just go to New York and you start. I said, you just start? Yeah, you just start. I can do that? Yeah, well, and if you change your mind, you'll change your mind. And it was that permission of, oh yeah, I'll just start. And if I can't, then I'll change my mind and figure it out again. And that was a really, I had the privilege of feeling safe in that decision, right? But also a really amazing moment of, oh, let's move on to what's next.
And I definitely brought this place up last year, but here in Connecticut, we are very lucky to house the National Theater Institute over in Waterford, and their slogan is risk, fail, risk again. So I had that chance to just go out there, do it, see what happens. I think it's really important. All right, folks, but now we're going to turn it over to y'all. So my wonderful colleagues, Kathy Seehey and Deirdre Sullivan, they have the mic runners, and we are going to just put your hand up, and we'll go from there. So Kathy's got one.
I am absolutely blown away by your brilliance and your wit and your camaraderie. It's just amazing. And Travis as well. Question more directed, I guess, toward Tina. If you have a show that is going to be opening up on Broadway, and you've had it out in the wilderness, so to speak, like La Jolla, and you're going to be making changes or assessing if changes need to be made, I would assume that you're also getting feedback from the audience. How do you know how those changes or the feedback they're getting from an audience in a small town somewhere, La Jolla is not really one of them, that it will fit your finished product when you get it to Broadway? How do you sense changes?
That's a good question. Thank you for it. There is a degree to which you can gauge things like laughs and applause, and restlessness, and walkouts. But that to me feels like just the surface. Like if something is happening really consistently, like there was a song in La Jolla, a big number of Adinas, that we all thought this is like one of the greatest numbers in the show, and we are getting moderate to mediocre applause. Something is wrong. We spent weeks working on the last 10 seconds of that song, and including something in the musical theater that's called the button, which is whether something goes da donk, or whether it goes ding da 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 da. It's like how it ends, and you start to learn these incredibly complex, like craft psychological things about if the light cue with the button is like a bump, or if it's a 1 count in how it goes. So there's a lot of that goes on off of audience. But I would say for me, moving from La Jolla to New York, it actually had to do with almost the opposite, which was quiet, solo, soul searching. And that just came from me having watched the show a ton in La Jolla. And in a weird way, it's almost harder to be true to yourself and hear your own voice in these moments when you're crowded by producer notes and audience feedback. And so I personally just work really hard to, in a way, shut that out and like get quiet again. And I would say most of the changes we've made since Lawyer are because of that. Thank you.
Deirdre's got one down front.
Yes, this question is for all of you. We recently had the pleasure of hearing in conversation on the same stage Percival Everett. And we learned that his work, book is being optioned, is going to become a movie. And I remember driving away from the library thinking, I wonder what that would be like on stage. Yeah. And so I have the same question for you. Are there works of literature? Are there things out there that you just kind of dream of seeing on stage, whether you bring it to stage or not, but you think are just waiting to be seen in a different way?
I love this question, so I really hope we get answers today.
I feel like a lot of Toni Morrison's works are already operas. I was going to say Song of Solomon, but I think that's an opera already. Tom Wolfe, A Man in Full. I thought that was such an fascinating perspective on culture in Atlanta and race, and he got it right. And when that came out, I was reading the book. I was at a Black journalist conference, and another person was reading the same book. And we both talked about, like, it's very rare for someone to get this many layers right. And then I read later on, while waiting to interview someone, I read the first 90 pages of Bonfire of the Vanities while waiting to do an interview. And it had the same feel to it. And I know that's a bit cursed because of the movie, but I think on stage you can get the chaos of the opening scene of a New York City Council meeting, and, you know, Black people, Latino people, Jewish people all shouting at each other. And it was just so funny and fascinating and rich and entertaining that I think it might work better on a stage than it did in the movies.
And for me, I'm thinking about it. I'm glad you asked. 'Cause I'm like, how does that work? I think of the shows I'm thinking of now that I've done, I would say almost all of them started with a kernel, like almost a single blazing image that I couldn't dislodge. Like that just, like on Redwood, it's the image of a woman in a tree. Adina and I had talked about this historical woman, Julia Butterfly Hill, who protests the timber companies cutting down the redwoods in the 90s. And we had talked about her, but that went away, but neither of us could shake the image of a woman sitting in a tree. And then, so I kind of go from there and start, and with Floyd Collins, it was the same. Adam and I came across a paragraph in a Reader's Digest something that was titled Death Watch Carnival. And this is really weird, because, okay, Redwood is about a woman who goes up into a tree and stays there. Floyd is about a man who goes into a cave and stays there. I didn't know this until I realized both shows were happening back to back. But in both cases, it was that. It was almost like a metaphor that was so compelling and powerful and mysterious to me that I felt I had to go and understand it better.
Oh,
Do you have an answer? Yeah.
It's a beautiful, the idea of going someplace and sitting, thinking about Swept Away too, and where we are. We were talking post-COVID and what that means right now. No, I didn't do Swept Away, but just thinking about going and being in one place, right? Yeah. It's interesting, our theatrical season, how we hold ideas about what it means to tell stories right now. I get the phone call when it's there's a summoning, there's a magic moment, right? They'll often offer me the script and I nod and smile, but I'm more interested in the who's involved and the what's. It's a spell that's being woven when the phone rings for me, because it's the trust of Oh, Tina's making a thing. Sounds lovely. Oh, as opposed to saying, well, I want to make sure I understand the story. The story's coming. We'll trust that. And same with Death Becomes Her. It's who knows what this thing is. Let's just let it cook for a little bit. I don't need that answer yet.
I just want to also admit, at the same time, I spend most of my life walking around thinking about the possibility of everything being my next musical. Like at the same time, I'm like the way you're nodding right now. Oh, that could be something. Oh, look at your red sweater. What about a musical about a red sweater? Sometimes I can't turn that off.
I think we have time for one or two more. Any questions down front? Deirdre, yeah.
My question is it important because of the cost of getting the people, getting the audience to the show, and the cost versus the cost of making it, to make sure you have someone like an actor who has like a name recognition, and do you think that has helped you, like with McNeil, for example, that raised the prices? And I'm just curious about that. Sutton Foster.
I mean, it's a very real economic reality of a way to solve it, and that's historical. That's not just of this moment, right? Throughout the ages, vaudeville, right? It's hooked on people's personalities and presence. Now, that's not the only way to sell or to invite people into our show, right? And so, how do we invoke the public's imagination to say, "I want to be a part of that. I want to be in that room." And that's what I think it starts to be exciting. And certainly, oh my gosh, who's going to be in it? I want to see what they're like in person is one of the ways that we do that. But just to give a plug to maybe Happy Ending, like what an amazing story that's happening right now. And oh, it doesn't have the, so maybe I shouldn't trust it. Let's go see a show.
I mean, it's certainly, conventional wisdom at the moment is it helps. And I've never met a producer, not a director or designer or writer, I've never met a producer who doesn't want to try to get a name in a show. And I understand why. At the same time, for me, it's a very thin line because you also don't want to do what we might call stunt casting or just kind of getting so desperate to get a name in the role that's actually not right for the role. So it's a thing that happens that you have to navigate carefully, I think.
I mean, I can share because I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but in 2022, I wrote, with the permission of the estate, a new adaptation of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for West End producers, taking out some of the problematic things while maintaining it in the 70s and respecting the novelist, and then trying to bring stuff in the novel on stage. Because there's beautiful imagery in the novel that people back then in the 70s, when they did it more naturalistic as a play, didn't include. And I finished it, and we read it. Everyone loved it. We've just been looking for a star that fits the role, not to be stunt casting. And so we've had meeting after meeting of who could play McMurphy. Nurse Ratched, there are a few very good actresses who are willing to do it, but it's like we got to get McMurphy, and going through a list of, and we're waiting. Who knows if it'll ever happen, but we read the script in my agent's office. We had good theater actors from New York City at the table. Excellent. But the producers were like, this has to open in the West End in London. And we need someone who can draw and attract attention to a London audience that has that mix of star power and talent. And so you're just waiting. There are tons of projects that are like that are, everyone goes, this is good, this is great, and you're just waiting for 10 people to become available so that these producers can put a stamp on their money. I would like to do it right now, but I don't have to invest the money and take the risk of having an amazing actor who no one knows do McMurphy, and then people don't show up for it, versus pick a name, or Tom Cruise or whatever, pick a name that people would automatically just show up for regardless of the quality of the work.
And I will say, I think that's directly in ratio to how big the cast is. I think producers get a little more like we need a name if you're talking about a cast of 15 or more. I mean, Cuckoo's Nest is a big cast, right? It's like 18 or something, I don't know what. But And when shows are smaller and have less running cost per week, because the bigger the cast, the more it costs to run weekly. The more tech, the more it costs to run weekly. So the kind of smaller and more scruffy the show is, the more willing producers are to take the gamble that Justin is saying, which is there are other ways to sell a show, primarily if it's really good.
And just to tie this up, because we have to wrap it up here, folks, but to go back to what Justin said, with maybe Happy Ending, which you should all go see because it's wonderful. New York Times critics pick, everyone loves it, it's amazing. It is a small show with, Darren Criss is a good size name, but the tech on it is otherworldly, like nothing you have seen or will probably see again anytime soon. So to have this small, ragamuffin is so the wrong word, but small, like ragamuffin show that is a completely original thought, which does not happen anymore. It's really, although Redwood is totally original. What am I saying? I am so sorry, Tina. But it's just really fantastic. So definitely should go check out maybe Happy Ending. So with that, do you want to? Yeah.
I do want to say something.
Yes.
I've been sitting here marveling at you.
Oh, thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
this is like you are a host who is so enthusiastic and warm and so knowledgeable, and it's rare, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
here,
you,
here.
Tina. Thank you. I appreciate it. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. So can we, I know what a note to end on, right? Can I get one more round of applause for the amazing Aurin Squire, Justin Townsend, Tina Landau. Thank you all so much for coming, and we hope to see you soon.